The Joseon Dynasty, which lasted for over 500 years, 1392–1910, was the last unified feudal kingdom on the Korean peninsula. Today's clothing, food culture, and customs of this land were essentially shaped and spread during this period. In other words, every bite of food people now pick up with chopsticks or scoop with a spoon carries with it a fascinating and remarkable story from the past. For example, when the Joseon Dynasty was founded, its first king, Taejo Yi Seong-gye, worked to strengthen his new regime and began purging the remaining forces of the previous Goryeo royal family. The nobles of the former dynasty who fled in exile gave up all hope of returning to politics and instead turned to business. So at the start of the new year, with fresh hopes for a new life, they began eating a rice cake soup shaped like silkworm cocoons, symbolizing breaking the cocoon and becoming a butterfly. And this custom gradually formed. During the reign of Sejong the Great, 1418–1450, the creator of Hunmin Jeongeum and one of the founders of modern Hangul, the scholar Shin Suk-ju, received great favor from the king. But after Sejong and his son Munjong passed away, Shin Suk-ju assisted Grand Prince Suyang in a coup, overthrowing Sejong's lineage. Because civilians despised him deeply, they renamed easily spoiled mung bean sprouts Shukju bean sprouts, and the name has been passed down ever since. In the second year of King Injo's reign, the general Yi Gwal, who originally made great contributions during the Injo restoration, rebelled again out of dissatisfaction, taking control of Hanyang, Seoul. King Injo fled to Gongju in panic with no food or shelter. There he met a wealthy local who offered him a soft, tender rice cake covered in soybean powder. After tasting it, Injo felt it was absolutely delicious. Since the donor's surname was Ren, the king named the treat Injeolmi, meaning Im's exquisite delicacy. Later, its pronunciation evolved into today's famous Injeolmi, now a star dessert in Korean parties and celebrations. Traditional foods named after events caused by king's political decisions are everywhere in Korea today. So let us take a closer look at what exactly the supreme rulers of Joseon ate at their royal dining table and what rules and customs were involved. Speaking of the royal cuisine of Joseon and its connection to today's Korean food, hanjeong-sik is a term that cannot be avoided. This set-course meal, now common in Korea, first originated in the royal court, then was widely imitated by the Yangban elite, and eventually spread to the countryside, where, combined with local specialties, it developed into various regional home-style dishes. Before we talk about how the king's meals were set and served, allow me to first introduce the table on which the royal meal was placed, the Surasang. The word Sura comes from Mongolian, influenced by the Yuan dynasty, meaning meals shared by the king and the queen. By extension, the place where meals were prepared for the king was called the Sura room. However, according to the early 19th century realistic palace painting Donggoldo, besides the Sura room, there were also the inner kitchen and outer kitchen. Their general responsibilities were divided as follows. The outer kitchen handled national banquets for ceremonies like ancestral rites and royal investitures, while the inner kitchen prepared the royal family's daily meals. The process was, first cooking was completed in the inner kitchen, then the food was sent to the Sura room to be arranged and kept warm, so the king could dine at any time. The palace official responsible for coordinating all of this was known as the deputy steward of the Sura room. He had to present different sets of dishes to the king at 5 different times of the day. Upon waking in the morning, the king first enjoyed a porridge or rice soup called first morning meal. Around 10 a.m., there was a more formal meal called the morning sura. Lunch consisted of casual tea and snacks, and at 5 p.m., the main dinner known as the evening sura was served. Before going to bed at night, a late-night snack called the night tea fruit plate was presented. And among these 5 meals, the most lavish was certainly the evening sura, equivalent to dinner. This meal was based on at least 12 dishes, arranged separately on the large round table, the small round table, and the rectangular table tray. Taking an example restored by the Korean Cultural Heritage Administration based on the annals of King Yeongjo, reigned 1724–1706, on the large round table, the front left held white rice, and on the right was miuk tang, a soup made from seaweed. The second row held spitting bowls for fish bones, along with sauces like soy paste and vinegar sauce. At the center were grilled meats and vegetables. The back row contained dried foods, such as dried fish, stews, and boiled fish. Finally, there were watery radish kimchi and various pickled side dishes called shimchae. On the small round table, known as the serving tray, were red bean rice and hot pot. Behind them were yuko, raw seasoned beef, and steamed egg custard. Finally, on the rectangular tray were ox-bone soup, fish sauce-based stews, and a full set of grilled meats. In front of this carefully arranged dining setup stood a group of court ladies in attendance. Among them, the most important role was the so-called food tester. She sat before the small round table, responsible for checking the quality of the food and confirming whether it was poisonous. Therefore, this role was usually given only to someone who had served the king since childhood. Speaking of the first dish to appear daily, on the king's table in Joseon, it was often the so-called Tarak-juk. Its Korean pronunciation, Tarak-juk, is said to originate from the Turkic word tarak, meaning dairy product. According to the annals of the Joseon Dynasty, Tarak-juk was a nourishing food exclusively for the king. During the Joseon era, milk production had to rely on native Korean cattle, so milk could only be collected after calving. Thus, the production volume was extremely low, making it a luxurious ingredient that only the king could enjoy. In the annals of King Myeongjong, there is even a record of a minister, Yoon Won-hyung, being impeached for secretly using milk to make porridge for himself. In fact, the Tarak-juk that the Joseon kings truly ate. Because he secretly used milk to make porridge, he was exposed and impeached. In fact, the Tarak-juk truly eaten by Joseon kings was not made by palace cooks, but not made by palace cooks, and mainly came from physicians of the Royal Medical Office. Each year, from early October to the Lunar New Year, they would collect fresh milk, then cook ground new rice with water into rice porridge, and once it boiled, pour in the milk, finally adding salt or honey to taste, with dried fruit sprinkled on top. Besides being eaten, there was another reason the king was especially fond of this dish. The one serving Tarak-juk was often the medical gisaeng, who secretly enjoyed intimate nights with the king. Among all 26 Joseon kings, the most brutal and shameless tyrant was undoubtedly the 10th king, Yeonsangun Yi-young, also the second dethroned king. The 2015 Korean film The Treacherous, directed by Min Kyu-dong, tells the story of agents Yeonsangun sent to scour the country for beautiful women, and the practice of having medical women serve as royal concubines spread throughout the court from that time. At night, they would bring medicine boxes into the royal chambers and then spend the night with the king. In the morning, Tarak-juk would be delivered as breakfast, and the king often shared it with the medical gisaeng. Thus, on the Korean peninsula, a meaningful term was born: sharing milk. Around the same time, Yeonsangun brought medical women to his bed and ate Tarak-juk at dawn. Court scholar Jung Hee-ryang, who suffered in the Muo literati purge, was exiled to remote places like Uiju and Gimhae. During this time, this talented scholar chose to withdraw from worldly life and became a monk. Anger held in his heart, and besides writing many poems, "The North Wind Drives Me Here," he devoted himself to studying fortune and divination. And it is said that every mealtime, he often used a small stove to cook mountain delicacies and vegetables. Later, rumors spread even further that he ascended to immortality in the mountains. So the cooking stove he left behind came to be known as the immortal stove, sinsilo. Based on this cooking pot, the Korean peninsula later developed another famous royal dish, yeolgujatang, royal hot pot. The name yeolguja may sound unfamiliar at first, but literally it simply means pleasant to the mouth. Its true origin definitely did not come from mystical tales of ascension. The earliest written record of it comes from the year 1704 in Aeonmun Siseol, written by interpreter Lee Pyo. Judging from the shape of the immortal stove and the customs of that time, we can infer that this dish was likely a variation of the Qing dynasty hot pot. It was served in a hollow brass pot, silver in the royal palace, filled with clear chicken broth, sometimes beef or seafood. Up to 25 ingredients were added, then brought to a boil and eaten by scooping with a spoon. Compared with traditional Chinese hot pot, it had two major differences. First, yeolgujatang did not rely on dipping sauces, but used only the broth from the pot. Second, the main ingredients, such as beef balls, liver, tripe, fish, vegetables, etc., were first dusted with flour and egg wash, then lightly pan-fried, cut into rectangles and neatly arranged. This method improved appearance, and the resulting broth became richer and more fragrant. It is said that in 1801, during Joseon's first suppression of Catholicism, known as the Sin-Yu persecution, the famous Jong brothers of the scholarly world were all implicated. The second brother, Jong Yak-jong, died a martyr. The eldest, Jong Yak-jon, after being exiled to Huksando Island, developed a deep interest in marine biology. Later, he worked with a local fisherman, Jang Chang-dai, to complete a monumental book documenting 155 marine species, Jasan Aobo. My thirsty throat turns to a choked cry. As for the youngest Jong brother, my thirsty throat turns to a choked cry. Jong Yak-yong, pen name Dasan, was the greatest scholar of Joseon Silhak, practical learning. My brother's strength howling like the wind, and after Yi Gyubo at Changbin-ri, he became Joseon's most accomplished realist poet. His idol was none other than Tang Dynasty poet sage Du Fu. When he served as a librarian at the Gyeojanggak Hall in Changdeok Palace, King Jongjo of Joseon bestowed upon him a pot of yeolgujatang. To express his gratitude, he wrote a poem on the spot. The poem reads, "Well, to be honest, that poem feels a bit plain in expression, a bit lacking, but it really does have a trace of Du Fu's realism. Yeolgujatang bestowed from the palace, brought by Ryu Myungpyo. Quite nice."